Thank you for joining us for today's event, Community Conversations for Election 2024, presented by Annie Kaplan, Director of Engagement at Living Room Conversations. This event is being hosted by the Colorado State Library. My name is Christy Moran. My pronouns are she and ella. And I am the Adult Library Services Senior Consultant for the Colorado State Library, or as I like to say, a librarian for librarians and library staff in Colorado. Live captioning will be provided during today's session. I will place a link in the chat now for the live caption transcript. Today's event is being recorded, and all registrants will receive an email with the link to the recording and a PDF of the slides and the resources shared. Our presenter will leave some time for questions at the end of their presentation. At the end of this session, I'll be sharing a link to a survey. The State Library uses this survey to inform our work and to report on the value of our programming. Keeping on admitting folks. Please use the chat throughout as questions arise for you, and I'll share them with our presenters when it's time for that Q&A. So let me go ahead and put in that live caption link. You should be able to access there. And I'll leave you with Annie Kaplan. And Annie, I'll start sharing your slides.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you all for joining today and taking the time to be here. As Christy said, I'm the Director of Engagement for Living Room Conversations. Prior to that, I was the library partner, and prior to that, I was an adult services librarian. So I deeply appreciate and admire everyone in the library field and the work that you all are doing.
Annie, is your slide on the screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Let me know when to move.
Okay, perfect. Next slide, please. So to give you a little background about our organization, Living Room Conversations is a national organization in the bridge building movement with expertise in crafting effective and accessible tools for dialogue. And bridge building is this practice of bringing together people or perspectives that are currently disconnected or divided. We build bridges for the purpose of cultivating understanding, curiosity, trust, empathy, respect, relationships, and common ground. Living Room Conversations does this through advancing the practices of listening, constructive conversation, community building, and collaborative problem solving. We work extensively with libraries across the country to help them engage their community members in conversation and civil discourse. And these are a few of the libraries that we've worked with. And as you can see, we work with libraries of all sizes and community types, both small and rural, as well as large and urban. We have a plug and play library program and dialogue model that can be used in really any library setting. Living Room Conversations can be a one-time event, as well as a continual library program. Our format engages community members and helps libraries expand their community impact and deepen their role as community centers. Next slide, please. So why is it so important for libraries to hold community dialogue programs? Libraries are uniquely positioned within our communities. We're community conveners, one of the last trusted public institutions in America, at least for a lot of folks. We're community centers. No library is perfect, of course, and we always have more work to do around this, but we are striving to be accessible and inclusive of everyone. Libraries are the most democratic public institutions in America, and most importantly, libraries are made up of people like you all. People who genuinely care about the well-being of the individuals in our communities and want to create a safe, welcoming, inclusive, and engaging space where people can come, connect with each other, learn, and grow together. Through dialogue programming, through these types of living room conversations, people are able to hear their voices at the library. They start to feel seen and heard and come to know the library as being this place in their community where they can go and feel like they belong. Next slide, please. So trust and connection is easier built in local settings and communities. We partnered with Fetzer Institute to conduct an 18-month study on the effects of living room conversations. And they found from this study that just after one living room conversation, folks had an improved mindset, better listening skills, an increased understanding of other folks' perspectives, greater interest in systemic issues, and they were able to humanize people that they viewed as the other or different than them. The impact of communities of practice who held regular conversations was that they were able to generate a baseline of trust across ideological differences. They shifted power dynamics between different groups. So Estes Valley Library here in Colorado, for example, held conversations between local law enforcement and just everyday community members. And through these conversations, people really shifted their view of us versus them to just all of us together in this community. And we're able to view everyone as having more equal power in the community instead of powerful versus powerless groups. People were also able to apply conversation techniques to other parts of their lives with other people in their lives beyond those conversations that they held in this controlled space. So if we want this systems change, we oftentimes have to start at the grassroots level. So if you do go ahead and hold living room conversations, you're making this investment both individually as members of your own community and society as a whole. Next slide, please. As you all know, we're all living in a very unique time of increasing skepticism and polarization around elections. So fostering trust in the electoral process has become paramount for the health of our democracy. Living Room Conversations is excited to launch our new initiative focused on trust in elections conversations, and we invite you to join us in bridging divides and building faith in our electoral system. We believe in the power of civil dialogue to create understanding and forge connections across differences. Our Trust in Elections conversations seek to facilitate constructive discussions that promote transparency, accountability, and competence in our electoral processes. We all know what to expect with this upcoming presidential election after experiencing the last one. So if we start planning and having these conversations now, we still have a chance to get ahead of this and build trust in our elections and each other so that no matter how this all unfolds in the fall, it doesn't break down our relationships, communities, and our country. I facilitated a Trust in Elections living room conversation recently, and one of the participants had been a poll worker for years. And all of us in that conversation learned so much from her experiences. She was able to tell us firsthand about all of the checks and verification measures that went on behind the scenes. And it was such a valuable learning opportunity and a way for us to get to know more about how our electoral processes actually work beyond what we're just reading on social media or the latest headlines. And when you're in a conversation like this, hearing from the experiences of your neighbor or someone you know is in your community, it's a lot harder to write something off as fake news. Next slide, please. So these types of group conversations and dialogue play a crucial role in healing toxic polarization, which many, if not all of us, have seen an increase of in the last several years, both within our country as a whole and also within our communities and maybe even our families. Conversations provide a platform for individuals with differing perspectives to come together, listen to one another, find common ground, and recognize our shared humanity. By engaging in open and respectful discussions, people can better understand each other's concerns, values, and experiences. These conversations help break down the barriers that toxic polarization creates, fostering empathy and building bridges between individuals and groups. They create spaces for people to challenge their own biases, expand their perspectives, and find shared solutions to complex problems. Living Room Conversations creates these spaces for constructive engagement, where people can learn effective communication skills and really practice active listening. This helps to reduce hostility and animosity amongst individuals, promoting a more inclusive, respectful, and cohesive community. The National Governors Association has launched their new Disagree Better initiative aimed at addressing America's polarization problem. And they recommend using living room conversations to help bridge divides between both individuals and groups. Next slide, please. Community conversations can also be a really effective way to counter the spread of misinformation. They're a great way to build trust. Community conversations create a space where people can engage directly with each other face to face instead of over the comments on Facebook or something like that. And this personal interaction fosters trust amongst community members. When people trust each other, they're much more likely to question and verify information rather than simply accepting it at face value. Misinformation also thrives in echo chambers where people are only exposed to information that confirms their existing beliefs. Community conversations bring people together and individuals with diverse backgrounds and viewpoints. This diversity allows for a broader understanding of issues and helps to challenge false narratives. By engaging in ongoing conversations, communities create more resilient networks and become more resilient to misinformation over time. They create groups and circles where accurate information can be shared and where individuals feel empowered to question and challenge misleading claims. These conversations are also grounded in local context and address issues that are relevant to participants. By focusing on specific concerns and experiences, these conversations can provide targeted responses to misinformation that directly impact your individual community. So instead of just hearing what's going on in a national context, by really grounding this experience in hyperlocalism, it's just able to, help people really see what's going on in their local context. Community conversations are effective tools for countering misinformation because they leverage the collective knowledge, experience, and trust within communities to promote critical thinking, fact-checking, and responsible information sharing. By strengthening community bonds and fostering a culture of openness and dialogue, these conversations contribute to a more informed and resilient society. And I think above all, these conversations build relationships. They bring people together who would have never talked to each other otherwise. And there's been so much dehumanization going on, and this makes it so much easier for people to turn against each other. And there's this idea that I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, that it's really hard to hate someone up close. So by bringing people together to talk to each other up close, face to face, they start to see the truth. And just remember that there really is so much more that connects us than divides us. Next slide, please. So that's kind of the why behind this work. Now let's talk about how to actually do this. So if we look at what keeps us out of conversation, a lot of it has to do with not feeling like we have the skills, confidence, or the opportunity to engage with people, especially people that think differently than we do. Living room conversations opens that door. Our model equalizes power dynamics by giving each participant the same amount of time and space to talk. Participants refrain from crosstalk, so everyone can expect to have their turn to share and be listened to. This model draws out stories, experiences, and narratives instead of facts and opinions. We also use shared norms and agreements to create a safe container for respectful and meaningful dialogue. Living room conversations build short bridges first. We have a series of what we call question rounds, and they build upon each other so that folks connect around shared values before they even begin to touch on what they disagree on. Living room conversations allow a culture of listening, respect, and friendship to develop across differences. They're also highly adaptable to your community's needs. We have conversations on trust and elections, but also on 160 other topics. So you can really choose what is most relevant for you and your community. Our plug and play model can be used in libraries of all sizes and community types, both small and rural, as well as large and urban, and everything in between. Next slide, please. So the model itself has a plug and play format. This makes it easy for library staff, friends of the library, or volunteers to use. It's ideal for groups of 4 to 6 people. So as you can see in this photo, when we have community events, we just split people off into groups of 4 to 6 and set up multiple tables around the meeting room. These conversations are designed to last 60 to 90 minutes. I generally find that I've never had folks really leave before 90 minutes. So I would definitely recommend going longer if you have the time to with your program. And they have a very simple structure with 3 rounds of conversation. And as I was saying earlier, living room conversations are very intentionally designed to build understanding. So we ground all of these conversations in personal experiences. Our dialogue model is not for deliberation. We don't come to a consensus, and we're not trying to reach any point. These conversations are not debates. They're just a chance for us to listen to other people and share our own experiences. Next slide, please. So now we'll get into the guide itself, what it looks like, and then we'll have time to go into a mini living room conversation. So we have a formatted conversation model, and a formatted conversation is disruptive. It helps us break our bad communication habits and equalizes power dynamics. It gives equal opportunities to both contribute and participate. And a format can really help folks get beyond their typical habitual patterns and learn to develop new, healthier ones. So all of our conversations start with a brief explanation of the topic. Folks then do introductions and share why they're here. There's then a series of conversation agreements, and these are ground rules essentially about how everyone will engage with each other. And we'll go over these more in depth in just a moment here. But then there's 3 question rounds. The first question round is just getting to know each other questions. Things like what purpose or mission guides you in your life? What would your best friend say about you? And research has shown that when we connect around shared values in these round 1 questions, we're able to see our common humanity and cultivate compassion for another person. This helps us become more open to being able to truly hear and see this person as our equal with reasons for why they believe what they do, even if that's very different from our own. There's then round 2 questions, which are questions that explore the topic itself. And then round 3, reflection questions, just giving people a moment to pause and think about, what am I walking away with from this conversation? What's the next step I could take to foster more trust in elections within my community? Things like that. And so holding dialogue events and community conversations can sometimes seem like a daunting task, especially on a topic like this, trust in elections. So we've created these step-by-step conversation guides that make facilitating community conversations as straightforward and simple as possible. You have all of the instructions, timing, conversation agreements, and questions laid out for you in these guides. So it really takes the guesswork out of this type of event. And as library staff, we're wearing so many hats as it is. Rarely, if ever, do we have the time or capacity to add another big task to our plate. So living room conversations are very intentionally designed to be a very light lift with these conversation guides. Next slide, please. So these are the conversation agreements that I mentioned, and these create the container for every living room conversation. They completely shift the tone of the entire conversation and make communicating an intentional and conscious practice instead of just an unconscious reaction, like it oftentimes is. Conversation agreements give a preview of the skills that we'll be practicing in the living room conversation. So I invite you to think about a conversation you wish you could have with someone, whether it's a family member, friend, or coworker. And as I go over these agreements, just think about which one might make the most difference in being able to have that difficult conversation you wish you could have. So I won't read the whole thing out, but the first one is be curious and listen to understand, then show respect and suspend judgment. Note any common ground as well as any differences. Be authentic and welcome that from others. Be purposeful and to the point. Own and guide the conversation. And so when we're being mindful of these agreements, it completely changes the way we converse with each other. As you can see, these are all pretty simple concepts. They're just things that we're not typically being mindful of in our everyday interactions with people. So when we are being mindful of these agreements, it just really transforms the way the conversation goes. And as patrons engage in the process of a living room conversation, they're acquiring and practicing all of these skills. And so when I'm facilitating a conversation, I generally go around and ask for a different volunteer to read each of these conversation agreements. And I definitely recommend doing that because having people read these out loud is oftentimes the icebreaker they need to, hear their voice in the room and be brave and start sharing. Okay, so let's do some experiential learning and actually go into a mini living room conversation. And I will share my screen here and go over this conversation guide with you all. Let's see. Okay, is everyone able to see my screen okay?
Annie, would you like me to share the link to the conversation guide in the chat?
Yes, that would be great. So feel free to look at my screen. Feel free to click on the link that Christy just put in the chat. They both go to this example of a conversation guide. This is our Trust and Elections conversation guide. I changed it just a little bit so that we would have enough time to go through this together. But this is what you'll be working with essentially. And so you all are going to go out into breakout groups in just a couple minutes here. And you'll just follow this conversation guide. So I invite you to pull that link up before I'm done going over it, just so you'll be able to have that and bring it into your breakout group. So all of the instructions are blue and italicized. And so you'll start with introductions. And you'll see the instructions right here. Each participant has 1 minute to introduce themselves. You'll all share your name, where you live, what drew you here, and you'll take about 3 minutes to do this in total. So each person will have about a minute to share. We just went through the conversation agreements together as a group. Feel free to go over them again if you'd like, but you definitely don't have to. You can just go right into the question rounds. So you'll see the first round at the bottom of the first page here, these getting to know each other questions. And then you'll see the instruction directly underneath. Each participant can take 1 to 2 minutes to answer one of these questions. And you can choose any question that's in that list. You don't all have to pick the same question, just pick whichever question you personally would like. And you'll each choose one of those. Then you'll go into the round 2 questions at the top of the second page. One participant in your group can volunteer to read this opening paragraph here. And then you'll each take about 2 minutes to answer one of the questions below without any interruption or crosstalk. So I invite you, if you do have something you want to say, you can always write it down, but every person will just be sharing and being listened to at this point without any crosstalk. And again, same thing, you don't all have to choose the same question. You can choose just any question that you'd like. And after everyone has answered, then the group can take a few minutes for clarifying or follow-up questions and responses. And just be really mindful of those conversation agreements when you are engaging in dialogue at this point. If you do have any extra time, feel free to go through these questions again, and you can answer a different one. And then there's the round 3 reflection questions. You would normally do these in a group, but just in the interest of time, I'm going to bring everyone back before this round and ask folks to share some reflections with the group as a whole. So does anyone have any questions before we all go into breakout groups? Okay, perfect. Let me put you all in breakout groups then. We'll wait just another minute for everyone to come back from their rooms, but we'll get started after that.
Are you back at seeing your slides, Annie?
Yes.
Excellent. Let me know when to go next.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Welcome back, everyone. Looks like we still have a couple more folks trickling in. We'll give just another second here. Okay, welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed your conversations. Normally these conversations last 90 minutes, so this is just a little taste of what a living room conversation is like. But I would love to hear from 2 or 3 folks, some reflections, if anyone has any that they would like to share, anything you learned, anything you found valuable, anything you're walking away with. Feel free to either drop them in the chat, or you can please unmute yourself and share with the entire group. I see some folks enjoyed chatting with their groups, that it was a good experience.
I can speak out loud
That'd be great.
if
Thank
that's
you.
okay. I'm Robin,
Thank you.
and I was in a room with Sean and Rosemarie, who are both in Colorado. I'm in New Orleans, and we ran out of time in a minute, getting to know each other and finding our sort of alignments and sharing our experiences was great, and it really helped set the tone for an engaging conversation. Thank you.
That's so great to hear. Thank you, Robin. I see that it was fun. Seeing it acted out makes me feel a little more confident about the process. Felt that you didn't have enough time. Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, 20 minutes is not enough time for this. Normally it's 90, but I just wanted to, give you a little taste of what this is like. I see a couple questions. Yeah, I can definitely come back to those at the end and answer those. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. Appreciate that. Okay, perfect. Well, I definitely want to read through everyone's comments at the end. I'll make sure to save the chat, but in the interest of time, I'll just kind of finish up with the presentation. Christy, if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great, please. Thank you. Okay, so now that you kind of get the gist of what a living room conversation feels like, I wanted to share that we do have a stipend opportunity if you're interested in hosting one of these conversations at your own library. We've partnered with a research team to understand participants' trusts in and intended actions towards US elections. So we will be compensating local organizing hosts and participants who are willing to take a short anonymous survey before and after the trust and elections conversation. So we can compensate your library $100 with $100 stipend, and then any patrons who are there who fill out the survey get $10 gift cards. So if you are interested in that opportunity, I just put a link in the chat. Please fill out that Google form and we'll definitely follow up with you. But yeah, we are definitely excited about this initiative and being able to, compensate people a little bit for hosting these. So that is all I have on my end. I would love to take the next 5 minutes to answer some questions now.
Annie, a couple people put in questions. One question, and I'll put my camera on, that I get a lot about living room conversations is from Terza, and I'm really sorry if I mispronounced that. Please correct me. One question I had: in a place where one political view dominates, or at least on the surface dominates, how do you attract people to your conversation who don't share the prevailing view?
Yeah, when I was working in a library, we had a very politically homogenous community. So I just had to really go so far out of my way with outreach, and start like building relationships with groups who we didn't currently have relationships with. Before I even invited them to the conversation, I just connected with them and invited them to, some more general library events. And then just really tried to make as many connections as possible with as many groups as possible. So just really, dedicating a lot of time and effort to outreach. And then also having a community partner is super valuable. I would always recommend this when it comes to really any programming, but especially this type of programming. If you can find a community partner who has access to different types of groups that normally, aren't there at the library, those people trust that community partner and just make it a lot more welcoming for them to come. And they also just have access to, that whole network. So outreach and community partnerships, I would say. And then I see quite a few questions. Christy, are you noticing any themes? So I can maybe answer multiple questions with one answer.
Yes, a few people, this is also one that I get, so I went ahead and gave an answer there, but Tracy asks, how do you handle a disruptive person in the conversation?
Yeah, so that can definitely happen, especially with some of these more polarizing topics. I always recommend falling back on those conversation agreements. They're a really easy way to just, bring people back together. So you can just pause the conversation like, hey, everyone, let's just take a moment to refer back to these conversation agreements. And you can, read out loud the one that pertains most to the situation. Oftentimes I encounter like over talkers and cross talkers. That's probably the most like common situation. And I just, refer back to that conversation agreement that there's no cross talking or interruptions. And just invite everyone to, take a moment to reflect on that conversation agreement before we begin the conversation again. And one thing that's nice too with that last conversation, own and guide the conversation, it says like feel free to use like the timeout sign if you need to take a moment at any point to pause the conversation. So having this agreed upon signal, and you can use any signal, it doesn't have to be that timeout sign. Some people have used like jazz hands or fun little things like that, but having an agreed upon signal before the conversation begins, before anyone's nervous system gets dysregulated or anything like that, being able to pull that out and pause the conversation, and maybe just, invite people to grab a drink, take a few breaths together, anything like that, makes it really easy to bring in that intervention.
Someone asked, and I went ahead and put in your resource about tips or tools for groups with diverse languages spoken. Colorado State Library funded the translation of 3, and hopefully in the future we will do more translations into Spanish of some topic guides. So I put the link there. Living Room Conversations has posted them on their website. And then someone does have a question for you though. Jeanette asks, I was afraid to broach sensitive topics like politics. And then the question, does the facilitator guide the group, or are they a part of the group, or do they keep the group moving along?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our model is designed for the host to participate. So you are welcome to also participate, and, because you do have to be neutral to some extent, you can, share whatever you feel comfortable sharing that's within those boundaries. But you are also welcome to not participate and just facilitate the conversation if that would make you feel more comfortable. I personally do like to participate in the conversation just because it does kind of break down those walls between everyone participating and this like outside facilitator. And if you lead out in vulnerability, it can really, encourage folks to do the same. So that's my preference, but you are welcome to do either one. And I see we are at the hour. Thank you all so much for your time and these questions. I just put my email in the chat. It's Annie@livingroomconversations.org. Please email me with any of these questions that I didn't get a chance to answer, or if you would like to talk about anything else related to this programming.